Okay, everyone. I think we still have people who are joining us, and that is perfectly fine. But for those who are going to be speaking here near the top of the agenda, if you will please be prepared, we will go ahead and get started with the program. And thank you, Mr. Bell. Good evening, all, and welcome to the Trust Talks program. My name is Wanda Allen Abraha, and I am the Director of the Human Relations, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department with the City of Winston-Salem. We're really excited to see so many of you here on the call, this virtual format. Normally, we do Trust Talks in person. And normally we have a lot of activity going on, which I'm sure we do, even in the virtual format. But we do not want you to think that this is going to be any less of a Trust Talks experience. This will still most assuredly be an information exchange, which is intended to be. And so just to give you some context for Trust Talks was created by the Human Relations Department approximately 10 years ago at the request of the Winston-Salem Police Department. The purpose of Trust Talks is to provide a safe space, a format, a platform for citizens and residents to interface with the Winston-Salem Police Department. The purpose is to build trust. We want to make sure that citizens and residents feel comfortable interfacing with police. Police officers are here to protect and serve the community, and they do that quite well. And the citizens and residents, of course, are the community. And so we want to make sure there is a way for open lines of communication to exist between the police department and our local community. The great thing about Trust Talks is it is a format that has been replicated in other communities. We have been replicated in Los Angeles, California. We've been replicated in Leavenworth, Kansas, and a few other places as well. And so this is a format that does work well for people or for organizations or municipalities who may want to customize this type of dialogue for their own communities. So each Trust Talks focuses on a different population or topical area of focus. In the past, we've done Trust Talks with the ministers here in Winston-Salem, with Leadership Winston-Salem, with ex-offenders, with teens and youth, with college students, and so on. And so tonight's Trust Talks is focused on gun violence. And of course, as we all know, gun violence is something that is very prevalent, not just in the Winston-Salem or Triad communities, but at large throughout the United States. And so, of course, here locally, people are concerned. Everyone's talking about it. And people don't want to just talk about it, but they want to also collaborate and come together and figure out real solutions. And that is what tonight's Trust Talks is all about. And so I really do thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us tonight for this very important conversation. And I would be remiss if I did not recognize that we do have elected officials on the call with us. And I know that I do see Council Member Annette Scipio from the East Ward here in Winston-Salem. Council Member Scipio, thank you for joining us tonight. And I am looking to see if we have any other elected officials. And if so, if someone would please let me know that so that I can acknowledge and thank them as well. Okay, well, seeing none, then we'll go ahead and continue with the program. So next up, we have remarks from our mayor, Alan Joins.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Alan Joins, Mayor of Winston-Salem, and it's my honor to provide greetings and welcome you to this Trust Talk event that's being sponsored by Human Relations Department here. I can't think of a more opportune time and need for such an event as we in our community unfortunately are experiencing rise in gun violence and overall violence in our community. So the more we as a city and as an organization can have chances for our citizens to interact with us, give us feedback, ask questions, and allow us to explain things we're doing, hopefully we can begin to address some of these issues. So again, welcome. Thank you for your participation, and I certainly want to thank our Human Relations Board as well as staff in pulling this together. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mayor Joins. And so as we continue on with the agenda, I just want to provide a little more context. We will be hearing from various leaders in the city of Winston-Salem who will be talking about gun violence through their own lenses. We'll be hearing about their perspectives and very brief comments from them as introductions into tonight's dialogue. And so hearing from Mayor Joins now, we will continue on with Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Martin.
Thank you very much. I also appreciate the opportunity to be here among our community. It's very important for the DA's office to hear from you all. I work for our elected DA, Jim O'Neill. Our job is often after the gun violence has occurred. It's very important that we be part of the solutions about how we can prevent it from happening. We are here to do justice. We're here to be part of the solution. We are open to listening to the solutions. We want to hear from the community. Although this is a trust talk, we want you all to know how much we believe in the ability of the community to make positive change and effectuate a solution to the gun violence that we are seeing. You know, we are part of the nation. As she mentioned, everyone is experiencing this surge in gun violence, but that doesn't mean it has to continue. It can stop. But we're here to make sure that we do justice when we can, and we want to hold people accountable for violent crime. But it certainly is a better solution that we never get into a situation where we have to prosecute crime. And I want you all to know that we are here to listen to what you have to say and answer as many questions as we have. We are here from the DA's office. Again, I'm a prosecutor, so we prosecute the crime after the officers have arrested an offender. And so we want to make sure everyone understands what our role is and that we have an open door policy. And again, our elected DA here in Forsyth County is Jim O'Neill, and I am representing his office here tonight. Thank you for inviting us, and we're here to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, ADA Martin. We appreciate having you here. And of course, you have participated in Trust Talks over the years, and we always appreciate your time and the DA's office interest in helping us to dialogue with our community. So thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome. And next up, we have our Assistant City Manager, Ms. Patrice Toney.
Thank you, Wanda, and good evening, everyone. I too am very interested in hearing from the community, and I'm so excited that we are engaging in trust talks and talks around police and making sure that the community trusts us and that we can engage in just this meaningful dialogue. Here at the City of Winston-Salem, we have invested in a number of programs related to violence prevention and gun prevention. We've invested some ARPA resources, and we also have partnered with the county in looking into a program called Cure Violence as one of the programs to address gun violence and gang prevention. And so we're currently in an assessment phase of looking into the Cure Violence program. It is an evidence-based program that looks at a public health approach to violence through more of an epidemiological lens as a learned transmissional behavior, which can be interrupted. And so we are really excited about the potential of this program coming to our community and being able to be one of many approaches to addressing violent crimes in this community. But as always, we have an amazing police department here in this city. They have a great gang unit, and every day they are striving to prevent crime in this area. And we really need the community support to parallel in that approach to addressing gun violence in this community. So thank you, Wanda, for having me, and I'm so honored to just hear what the community has to say.
Thank you, Patrice. Thank you for being here with us tonight. We appreciate your time. And next we have Mr. Andy Hagler, who is the Executive Director of the Mental Health Association for Forsyth County. Dr. Hagler?
Thank you, and thank you, Wanda, for the invite, and it's a pleasure to be here. And again, my name is Andy Hagler, and I'm the Executive Director of the Mental Health Association in Forsyth County. We're a nonprofit, non-governmental organization here in Forsyth County that helps, that is the community connector. We serve as an educator, and we provide an array of non-clinical programs and services to help educate, reduce the stigma associated with mental illness through a variety of mechanisms. And one of the things that a lot of people in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, but certainly those with the Winston-Salem Police Department are aware of, is a training that we, the Mental Health Association, are the lead organization, which is called Crisis Intervention Team, or CIT. Crisis Intervention Team is a 5-day, 40-hour training for all first responders. So that includes Winston-Salem Police, Forsyth County Sheriffs, our campus police, any first responder about mental health. But the crux of the program is really about communication, de-escalation, and helping individuals who may experience or who are in a mental health crisis, rather than, when warranted, handcuffing individuals and putting them in jail or having them put in jail. This is a program that really teaches about communication, de-escalation, and getting appropriate help for individuals with any kind of mental health issue. Mental illness affects about 20% of the population. So about 1 in 5 children, adults, and older adults are affected with mental illness. And about half of that 20% live with what we call serious mental illnesses, such as major depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, post-traumatic stress disorder, and so forth. And of course, one of the things about mental illness a lot of times is the stigma associated, where a lot of times there is that correlation or that predictor that mental illness is a predictor of violence. And that is not true. And in fact, people with mental illness are no more violent than the general population, which is somewhere around 4% of the population. Mental illness is not a predictor of violence, and rather, a lot of times people with mental illness oftentimes are more the victim of crime rather than the perpetrator of crime. Very sadly, mental illness is more of a predictor of suicide. And so a lot of, especially for people with mental illness and severe mental illness and gun violence, tends to be where maybe people take their own life through a gun. So part of what I'd like to do is to kind of help educate and work with folks. And of course, again, we're proud partners with the Winston-Salem Police Department and all of our first responders for really working to help all of our citizens, including those with mental health issues. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Hagler. And it is really important that we do talk about stereotypes and misconceptions. And that is a big part of what we do with Trust Talks.
And I'm a mister.
Okay.
and Andy's just fine.
Okay, Andy, thank you. And so, yes, stereotypes are a huge part of what we try to tackle and we try to address during these Trust Talk sessions. And again, with Trust Talks, it's not just talking. We actually strive to come up with real solutions, and those solutions and all of the brainstorming notes that you will see happening later are actually captured in writing by the Winston-Salem Police Department. And they use that information as a part of their training for their officers. And so it's really important to know you're not just here just to talk tonight. We are looking for some real solutions. We're looking for collaborations, and we're also looking for community resources to see what we already have in our community that could be helpful for people who unfortunately fall victim to gun violence or who may be perpetrators of it, so that they can get the help that they need as well. And I mentioned earlier that we've been doing Trust Talks for approximately 10 years. And one thing I wanted to mention is we have someone from the Winston-Salem Police Department on tonight who has been with us from the very first Trust Talks. And her name is Natasha Miles, and she is the Assistant Police Chief for the Winston-Salem Police Department. And it just so happens that this is her last day with the Winston-Salem Police Department. She has the audacity to retire. And I told her I did not think that was fair because she's far too young to retire, but she's retiring nonetheless. And I would just like to let her know how much we appreciate her. She approached me about doing tonight's Trust Talks. And when she told me that she was going to be retiring around this time, we wanted to make sure we held this Trust Talks before she actually retired. And so this is her very last day. And I would just like to tell Assistant Chief Miles that we dedicate tonight's Trust Talks to you. You have done so much work, not only for the Winston-Salem Police Department, but you've worked hard, just full of love and passion and with heartfelt effort in our community. And so everyone who knows you knows that about you. And so I just want you to know how much we think of you. We're going to miss working with you. And I want to just give you an opportunity to say whatever it is you may want to say right now.
Well, thank you, Wanda. I did not expect that.
I know.
I was trying to get away with you not knowing.
I know that too.
I just want to say thank you to everyone on the panel, Chief Thompson, Chief Weave, Chief Penn, if you're here. It is because of them I am who I am, especially over the last 4 or 5 years. I have learned so much from them. And I often tease Chief about working harder than I do. And that's not supposed to be, but she's dedicated to this community. And I look up to her in her role, and I appreciate you, Chief. I have fought a good fight. I've tried, from day one to try to make a difference. And I don't know how much of a difference I made, but I'm hoping that if I touched one person and made a difference in one person's life, that I've done my duty to this community. And I thank you.
You've got me tearing up. I assure you that you have touched way more than just one person. And I'm certainly one of those people. And I admire you both. But I do admire you, and I want to thank you for your willingness to work with us over the years, because you have made more of a difference than you could ever know. So thank you, Assistant Chief Miles. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so now,
Wanda, Councilmember Burke is here.
Oh, awesome. Welcome, Councilmember Burke from the Northeast Ward. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Here. Thank you.
Thank you. And so now we are going to hear from our esteemed Police Chief, Katrina Thompson. And indeed, I do have to echo what Assistant Chief Miles just said, which is that Chief Thompson has been just a joy and a pleasure for our department to partner with on different initiatives. And Trust Talks has certainly been the lead initiative. Chief Thompson and I have traveled together in other parts of the United States to teach other communities about Trust Talks and the model that we use. And it's always a pleasure to be in her company. So Chief Thompson, you're up next.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to thank you so much for those kind words. Before I move forward, I've got to say thank you so much, Chief Miles, for your service and your hard work over the years. As Wanda said, you have touched many people in many different ways. And the fact that tonight is your last night and you're here on the call till 9 o'clock is just evident of the dedication and service that you've given to this organization and this community for so long. I have said it over and over again. I don't know what we're going to do without you, but we do appreciate the work that you're doing, that you have done. And I hope I'm not out of line by saying this, but I'm going to let everybody know that Chief Miles lost a son to gun violence. And so I know by her going to Wanda, this is near and dear to her heart. And she has always worked, even before losing her son, to make this place, this community, this city better because of her presence. And so again, Chief Miles, thank you. And I also want to thank other members of my agency that are on this call. I'm gonna tell you, I get to work with some of the most professional women and men in this, in law enforcement, bar none. These guys and girls go out every day and give everything they have and then some. And sometimes they do it with very, very little appreciation. And in some cases, no assistance from even sometimes some of the very victims that are out there to protect. And so, again, I can't say thank you enough. And I only wish that you all knew how hard these women and men work every day and every night. And so to all of them and on this call, there are too many to actually name. I say thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be a member of your team. And thank you for keeping me on my toes. So Trust Talks has been a very, very important part of our community policing initiative. And community policing for us means that not only are we answering calls for service, that we are out there basically trying to solve the root of the problem. And in some cases, we realize it is beyond our control. By design, our agency is set up to be responsive. But as a group of problem solvers, we realize that responding to calls and investigating cases is not going to always get it done. So we've had to kind of cross the line and get involved in intervention and prevention. And that's where our community policing efforts come in. Again, we acknowledge we can't do it alone. We have to work with our clergy, with our nonprofits, with our businesses, with our schools, with other government organizations, and with our community at large. Trust Talks is a way for us to come together in a safe space to have open dialogue where we talk about experiences, both positive and negative, that we've had with each other and in law enforcement throughout our careers or our time. And in doing so, as we're doing that, we're, again, kind of breaking down or trying to break down barriers and build bridges. You may not like the answer to what we say, but at least you understand where we're coming from. I tell you that as we have these talks and as I'm working with staff internally, as we're going through promotions or transfers, I am reaching out to staff and asking, would you be willing to join a commission or a committee or one of our nonprofit organization boards? And not to give them more work, because believe me, they have enough work, but it's to create the opportunity for us to develop relationships with people so that we can talk about things, law enforcement and community related during non-enforcement, non-contentious times, and we can clear up some of the misconceptions. being able to develop those relationships, which is what's important to us, relationship building, because that's the nexus to everything. Being able to have those relationships in place before something bad happens gives us the opportunity to, when something bad does happen, you can come out and say, you know what, I don't like the way this looks, not at all. But you know what, I go to church with Katrina, or I work on the board with Natasha, or I coach with Lieutenant Wright, and I know their heart, I know where they're coming from. And so I'm going to allow the process to play out, trust the process, and see what happens. If it's not right, we're going to call them on it. And that's what we want you to do. At the end of the day, we're asking for a fair chance and not blind allegiance. And so I hope you'll find that to be true here tonight during Trust Talks. I ask that you be open-minded. We're thick-skinned, so don't be afraid of hurting our feelings. And we're going to be honest and give you the honest answer. And again, you may not like it, but we want you to at least understand. I could go on about this. I think I'm going to pause right here and let's move on. Thank you, Wanda.
Thank you, Chief. And just to piggyback on what you said, we do want open and honest dialogue. You're absolutely correct. We always encourage that. But in the spirit of open and honest dialogue, we also ask that you observe the rules of decorum. And so that's putting it nicely. And you know what I really mean is make sure you're respecting one another. What this isn't is a bashing session. This is not a finger pointing session or opportunity. And so if it turns into that, then we do reserve the right to mute you and to turn your camera off. This is intended to be solution driven. We want people to talk, exchange information, brainstorm, and come up with some real implementable solutions. And so please be mindful. I apologize up front. If it gets to that point, that is what we will do in order to protect the integrity of what we're trying to do with Trust Talks. And we say that and we do that with every single Trust Talks. And when we're in person, we let people know we will escort you from the room if you cannot observe the rules of decorum. So please be mindful that we really are exchanging information, and we really are trying to build that trust and get to know each other in a way so that we can exchange information that's meaningful and real. We're not just complaining about gun violence and how awful
practice and picking up them something to eat.
Can everybody please, if you're not on mute, would you please mute? Thank you. So again, that's what we want to just make sure that this stays positive and productive. All right. And so moving on, we have a firsthand experience that we have a resident from Winston-Salem who'd like to share with everyone tonight. And so I want to ensure that that resident is on the call right now. And so do we have Mr. Richardson on the call?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Mr. Richardson. You're up next if you would like to share your firsthand experience, because as we all know, we see the articles and we hear the news stories on TV about gun violence, but it's quite a different thing. It's relatable to people, real people that we know and trust and who are our neighbors and friends and family members. And so we really appreciate you being here, and we welcome you to share your experience with us all.
Okay, well, I'm also the co-chairman of the Gang Steering Committee as well. And back in '92, I was convicted of a conspiracy to traffic cocaine and a possession of a firearm charge. And and once I got incarcerated, I was able to see the impact that I had on the community by the wrong that I've done. So what happened was once I was incarcerated, it was the people who I encountered when I was locked up. And a lot of people that helped me along the way, and they told me, don't let your sentence be a life sentence, but just learn from it and move on. And that's what I did. So once I came home in 2000, I wanted to help the community and show that and then show that I've changed. And that's what I've done. And the gun violence that's in the city today is nowhere near what it was in the 90s and early 2000s. And we constantly see young people that's constantly picking these guns up. And I told police officers, a gun is very easy to get, very easy. Me as a felon, if I wanted to get one tonight, I could. That's how available there are. So it's going to take a lot of us to stop the gun violence. And the solution is not an easy fix because it goes back so far. And you got family members that don't want to be held accountable. And I learned to accept my accountability for what I've done. And that's what started the huge change. Once I said, listen, you the one decided to pick that gun up. You the one decided to sell that cocaine. It's your fault. I didn't blame no one else. And that's when I saw the change. And I said, you know what? I am a better person. I am a better person. And I'm able now to ride by the police officer, to any police officer, wave and smile. I even work with the police through Dr. Pam Peoples Joyner. And I constantly thank her every day for what she's done for me. I mean, she's just been wonderful. Chief Thompson has been wonderful. And that's pretty much it.
And thank you, Mr. Richardson, for sharing your firsthand experience. We appreciate that because, again, it brings the realness to us all. So thank you so much for your willingness to do that tonight.
Wanda, too, I want to also thank Mr. Richardson, not only for the work that he continues to do in our community, reaching these young people, but also being honest, open, and real about his life and his experience, because it's hard to kind of understand and believe people who hadn't walked in your shoes. And so having him out there and actually able to talk to some of these young people that we're dealing with, and we see some of them have already gone down the wrong road, but some of them we're steady telling, that's the wrong road. That's not the road you want to travel. And sometimes it seems like it goes on deaf ears when you have someone like Mr. Richardson, who's really willing to get out there and be open and honest and totally real with our young people. It really makes the difference, and it adds credibility to the work that we're trying to do.
Absolutely, Chief. Absolutely. And I wanted to afford an opportunity right now to ask if anyone who's spoken in the first segment, which is what we just completed, if anyone would like to make any follow-up comments or to afford our elected officials, if they would like to say anything at this point in time before we break off into our small group discussions. If you would like to say something at this time, please feel free to do so. Okay.
At this time, Member Burke wants to say something. Thank you so much. I just want to say to Assistant Chief Natasha Miles, we thank you for your commitment, your dedication, and your service to our community. And we know that your job has not been an easy job, but we have watched you over the years, and we see that you lead with your heart, you work with your heart, and your spirit will be missed. You've been awesome, and we really appreciate your service. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wanda, today is her birthday, too.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chief Thompson. Really, Assistant Chief Miles, you were just going to hide that from me too, right? Well, happy birthday to you. Thank you so much. That makes it even more special that you're taking time out to be with us tonight. So happy birthday to you, Chief Miles.
Thank you.
And I do believe that Ms. Tony, did I see you unmute?
Oh, just to acknowledge Councilmember Burke, I saw her.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone else have any comments they'd like to make? from our previous speakers or our elected officials? Okay, then. Well, we're going to move on. And so for this part of Trust Talks, this is when we break off into our small group discussions. And so what happens now at this point forward is everyone will have facilitators. The Human Relations Commission and the Human Relations staff will facilitate small group discussions. And I was remiss for not acknowledging our Human Relations Commission. I don't know how in the world I let that happen, but I would like to acknowledge that we do have the chairperson of the Winston-Salem Human Relations Commission on with us tonight, and that is Pastor Robert Leake. And so Chair Leake will be co-facilitating a small group. And we also have Commissioner Melissa Thompson from the Human Relations Commission. She will also be facilitating a small group. And I'm looking to see who's on my screen. Oh, and we of course have our vice chair of the Human Relations Commission, Commissioner Carrie Wiggins, and she will also be facilitating a small group. So we're going to have 4 small groups actually. And so you all will be cast away into your groups, and we will have you in the very capable hands of your group facilitators who will ask you questions. We have some guided questions to help facilitate tonight's discussions. What will happen at the end of your small group breakouts, you will come back together like we are now, and you each will share your top 3 recommendations for the Winston-Salem Police Department and or the community. Now, what's going to happen in these small groups is members of the community will be mixed in with members of the Winston-Salem Police Department. So everyone will be mixed in together responding to these questions. But again, the questions will be facilitated by the Human Relations Commission and staff. And so when you come back together, you will have already designated a group spokesperson to share your top 3. And everyone will have an opportunity to discuss and ask questions, and then we will conclude tonight's program, okay? So are there any questions or comments before we break out into small groups? Chief, did I see you? Okay.
I'm sorry, Wanda.
No, you're fine.
2 things. I was scrolling through. He's kind of in hiding, but our sheriff, Bobby Kimbrough, is a part of the group tonight, and our former police chief, Barry Roundtree, is also on the call.
Awesome. Sheriff Kimbrough, welcome. And former Chief Roundtree, welcome. And former Chief Roundtree will definitely remember Trust Talks very well, because he also was extremely supportive of this dialogue. So thank you, Chief Roundtree, for being here. And Sheriff Kimbrough, thank you. All right, thanks, Chief Thompson. And so now we are going to go ahead and we're going to break out into our small groups. And we do have everyone already, I think, assigned to the groups. And so you will go where you are assigned to go. Jamie, if we can go ahead and make that happen, we'll come back together after about an hour or so, and we will share our top 3 from each group. Thank you. And so at this point in time, we are going to share our top 3 takeaways, and every group should have a spokesperson. And so we will ask at this time for a volunteer. Which group would like to go first?
Since I was nominated, I'll go ahead and speak for group 4. That way we can have support if I missed anything. I'd say the top 3 takeaways would be: 1, there are groups already on the ground doing work to try and eliminate the gun violence amongst the youth. It's going to take more resources. And what those resources look like, number 1, come in the form of money, but definitely in the form of time. The other thing is that many spoke about the groups that are on the ground coming together with other agencies to reach out to the youth and their families, because I can't think of the group's name, but the Firearm Prevention, I think was their name, that group, they stated as soon as someone leaves, somebody else is going to come in and take the attention of those youth. So we got to make sure that we spend time and be consistent. And the other takeaway that I'd say is that the Winston-Salem Police Department and those groups in the community, and when I speak of those groups, I speak of Enough is Enough, 10,000 Fearless, Beating Up Bad Habits, and the Women's Gun Violence Prevention Coalition that I sit on that committee. We're all in the same, we all have the same emotion behind wanting to prevent the gun violence. But the common denominator is that there is a lack of trust, and trying to figure out how to bridge that trust. We're still looking to answer that question. However, what I will say, and this is personal, not for the group, we didn't get here overnight. So the solution is not going to come overnight.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. James. Did the group have any additional comments to add? If not, we'll go on to the next group. Who'd like to volunteer next?
I'll do group number 3. I put it into the chat. Our 3 major issues were the proper training on safety and helping especially the young kids to understand consequences. Second is mental health resources need to be available, and some of the things that were mentioned were yoga, mindfulness, de-escalation, anger management, mental health resources, depression, suicide prevention. And number 3, vocational training and other job opportunities.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Falls. We appreciate that. Any additional comments based on those top 3 takeaways?
I wanted to share, if no one else from our group wanted to share something that Ms. Falls touched on, and that was when she talked about the job readiness program. And we really were looking at, Stan shared a lot of information with us, but just looking at bringing back some of those vocational skills that were in schools at one point in time, teaching those kids trades so that they have the confidence and the knowledge to be able to gain employment, give them something positive to do, and to distract their attention away from something that may not be as focused. They may not be as focused on those issues if we can prepare them prior to them being removed from school or graduating from school, provide them with those resources that they would need. And I thought that was one of the other great takeaways that we talked about. So I just wanted to add that. And if there's anyone else that would like to share, please feel free to.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Vice Chair Wiggins. All right, who would like to go next? Which group? We have 2 left.
Group number 2 is our group Iris. We talked a lot about focusing in the family, starts in the family. We need to focus in the family, looking at ACS, adverse childhood experiences. So past trauma plays a factor, what they see at home and in their community, what resources are available out there. We need to find out what interests the children and youth in our community. What would they be interested in engaging? If we are able to create after-school care opportunities or during days that they're off from school, because we have some serious competition with gang activities. Did I cover everything, my group?
Yeah. Were those 3? You had 3 items that you just mentioned? Okay.
What resources are in the community and what interests children, focusing in the family And we have to look at adverse childhood experiences.
Oh, yes.
Trauma, whether it was physical trauma, whether it was violence that they witnessed at home or in their community.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
We did also talk about family accountability and what role the parents can play about holding the family accountable for the behavior of the children and not having young people out at unreasonable hours and teaching the children appropriate behavior and modeling appropriate behavior. I thought that was one of the best points, is if we don't model appropriate behavior for them, how can they learn anything?
And we also talk about the brain and brain development and how their brains are not developed. And Assistant DA Jennifer Martin mentioned how a lot of the children and youth are not equipped to handle conflict. So, and if that behavior wasn't modeled at home, they will not be able to display it.
And I'll top that out for our group with, we also talked about how we can get the whole family involved, and that this is an opportunity to bring people to the table, because if we don't have the people at the table that are most impacted by this, we cannot plan for those people. Those are the people that we need at the table, and we are the groups that should help to support them. And everything that everyone said was valid, but like without those people at the table, we can't continue to like plan for them. We have to plan with them. And I am willing, as I always have expressed in my community, to help to do this, because I know that it can be done. And this community has too many resources for us to not be able to solve these challenges. And one of the biggest problems is poverty and the concentrated poverty. I do believe that our city is going in the right direction. We're trying to eradicate poverty and provide opportunities, but the grassroots people that are most impacted have to be involved in what we're doing. And I really am thankful that this was happening tonight. And I was able to have this conversation with people. It was really a great experience.
Thank you. That is awesome. Thank you so much. And Chief Thompson, were you about to say something?
I just wanted to kind of capitalize or follow up on what was said. We were talking about brain development, and Ms. McDaniel mentioned the whole part about concentrated poverty. When you have concentrated poverty, you're talking about people who are underemployed, struggling with shelter, don't have access, and that means the kids don't have access to fresh fruits, produce, and healthy foods. And if kids are eating potato chips and cookies and cakes and pies as their meal for nutrition, then getting to healthy brain development is almost impossible. So all of those things go back to what I call the root of the problem. Law enforcement, by nature, are addressing the fruit of the problem. And we have got to, as a whole community, come together as we're doing tonight to really move the needle and change the way of life and the quality of life for so many people who don't even realize, because it's the only way they've ever lived, don't even realize how bad their quality of life is. And so when kids are hungry, how do we expect them to be able to learn in school? They can't. If kids are sleepy, how are they going to be able to learn in school? It's almost impossible. So again, those things are happening. Then kids have negative behaviors and display that in school. Then they're kicked out of school. When they're kicked out of school, even if they're suspended for a day or two, that's a day or two that mom and dad or grandparents or caregivers are at work or unavailable to care for them, leaving them by themselves. That means that's the opportunity for gangs and negative activity, criminal activity to creep in. And that's where we begin to have the criminal issues. But it all stemmed from them not growing up in an environment that is supporting them both internally and externally. And I think we've got to acknowledge that, and we've got to start dealing with that. Yes, we got to deal with the gun violence because it's got to stop. But we've got to think about and really hone in and put our resources into the things that's creating the gun violence. And it starts way before they interact with law enforcement or commit a drive-by shooting.
Point well taken, Chief. Any comments or replies to that? Okay.
Agreed.
Yes, that's where it starts.
A quick comment, just to make sure that we acknowledge the capacity that's required to do this work. It's time intensive, it's emotionally draining, for providers as well as those that we're working with. And again, quickly, I'm at Main Street Academy with all of the kids, not all of them, but the ones who can still attend a public school. And I can spend time, hours with one kid, and we can have a breakthrough. But what's the follow-up? Because there are others who need that same amount of time. So just making sure that we can also talk about how we build capacity, not outside of the home, but within the home to the outside.
I think there was another comment too. Did someone else have a comment they were about to make? Okay, all right. So moving on to the final group. I think we had one more group, right? Who's our spokesperson for the last group?
Yes, we did. But we were so much in the conversation that we did not select a spokesperson. So I'm gonna ask Adolfo to read it for us, if he doesn't mind.
Okay.
No, I don't, Chairperson Lee. I was taking copious notes of what was said, and I suggested to the group that the three kind of suggestions that I heard during the conversation was Chief Thompson mentioned that probably the Boys and Girls Club should be involved in the schools, that there should be programs there. That was one suggestion that I heard. Another suggestion, and please correct me if I tell this incorrectly, another suggestion was something like, let's show the power of firearms in an educated setting, perhaps to minors, so they know the power of a fire gun. So I believe that was one suggestion that I heard, or something along those lines. Another young man also said that there is a peace treaty or some type of truce between gangs in the south side of the city. And he mentioned that in a year and a half, they have respected and they have abided by that truce. And he believes that if the police or the city would give them resources and support, probably that truce could be extended or expanded throughout the city. I think that was another suggestion that I heard. There were other suggestions also about those gun shows, that there should be done something much more strongly about those gun shows, because this person was saying if there's no ammo, why do they, they cannot really use the guns. So he believed that having something to do on those gun shows would be important. Another officer mentioned also that unfortunately many minors, when they commit a crime, even when they shoot guns, they are released into their parents. And that apparently that's a different practice than it was in the past. So something on those suggestions we were hearing in our group. And please, anybody else that actually made the suggestion, probably they could express it better than I could by just taking notes. But I think the suggestions were along those lines.
Thank you, Adolfo. And Chief Thompson and ADA Martin, I wanted to ask you all now, Adolfo mentioned something about when kids are arrested over gun violence, they're released to their parents. Can one of you all kind of clarify that for everyone? I'm assuming you probably know what he was trying to articulate with that. Did that change somehow from the past?
I actually think Stan Clarkson from Juvenile Justice, our Chief Juvenile Court Counsel, probably is in a better position. With Raise the Age, I think it has had unintended consequences that has negatively impacted communities of color, and that COVID has also caused a natural delay in court proceedings, and people had concerns. And we don't have a juvenile detention facility in Forsyth County, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. So there is not a juvenile detention facility in Forsyth County. We have to contract out with other counties, and now they have filled up. And so I think that has sort of caused a burden on other counties who no longer can accept our juvenile offenders in some situations. And so there are limited options, except for the most violent offenders, for being housed pre-trial while they're awaiting a disposition of their cases, which means they return to their community in some cases. But what's most important to know, it's not the DA's decision about where they go. And I think that's always sometimes a misnomer. It's not the police officer's decision. It's not the DA's decision. It is a judicial decision about what happens to an offender pre-trial. First, they appear before a magistrate, or they are with a juvenile court counselor, and then they appear before a judge every 10 days if they are 17-year-olds and below. So that is what usually happens. And there's an exception to every rule, and there's always an anecdotal story that doesn't go along with the statutory scheme. But generally, that's what happens, is that there are not enough facilities around the state for juveniles offenders, because we have to have a contract or people willing to take some of our offenders. We also have to have an order from a judge saying a juvenile has to go into this place pre-trial.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. And you actually mentioned Stan Clarkson, and that's a great segue into our final point for tonight. And I'd like to thank each of the groups for presenting their top 3 takeaways. You all did a phenomenal job. And I'd like to thank your facilitators of your groups, because this is not an easy conversation to facilitate at all. So I would just like to thank all of you for participating in doing that. And Mr. Clarkson, could you go ahead and talk about some of the work that that you do over at the Division of Adult Correction and Juvenile Justice?
Sure. What would you specifically like to know about what we do?
Yeah, could you talk about some of the community resources, some of the groups? Okay.
Absolutely. Well, we make great use of community resources to try to address the issues of juvenile violence and juvenile crimes. And I'll share this screen. I shared in the other room. We have lots of programs available to combat the issues of juvenile crime. And one of the things that we do is we try to have programming at each end of the continuum. So prevention and intervention and programming for kids that get out from training schools and that kind of thing. I will post the link to that. So we have Juvenile Crime Prevention Council programming. And every year, the state of North Carolina gets about $900,000 to disperse for programming to try to prevent and address juvenile crime. And the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council is composed of 13 members. That includes the police department, the sheriff's department, various folks. And so we determine, based on statistics, based on risk and needs of the kids, what kind of programming would best suit the community. I'll drop in chat the link to juvenile crime prevention programs so that people can go to them, and private citizens can access this. Just a sec. It does not necessarily have to be juvenile justice referred. In fact, we like for kids not to penetrate the system. We want to try to keep kids out of the system if we can. And so if we've got good programming that can act as an alternative to being involved in the court system, we want to make sure that we utilize that. There's also a great program or a great link that we have called the Service Directory. And the Juvenile Justice Service Directory has a website where you can type in the county, the problem areas, the age of the kids, and it will return programming that's relevant to the county. So is this what you're wanting me to talk about, Wanda? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. This is it. And I know there were questions in the chat about how to join the Crime Prevention Council, questions about address the one about the links.
Right. There are private citizen positions on the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council. And if you go to the Forsyth County webpage, they have volunteer opportunities and people can apply, and those are appointed by the county commissioners. The county commissioners have to approve the final funding of it. We do monitoring of the programs every year. We go out on site to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do and meeting their measurable objectives. Another thing that we have, and people mentioned about the detention center that used to be here in Forsyth, we contract with Methodist Homes for Children, and we have a crisis and assessment center there. That's a secure facility that does a lot of testing, planning, psychiatric evaluation for kids so that we can transition them into the most appropriate programming to meet their levels and needs. That's operated here in Forsyth County, as well as a transition home for kids coming out of juvenile correctional facilities. So.
Thank you. And so in terms of custody for minors with guns and so forth, can you elaborate on that a little bit? ADA Martin talked about it briefly a few minutes ago. Is that something?
Well, like ADA Martin mentioned, it's essentially a judicial decision. And one of the changes that's happened in the past 2 years, North Carolina was the last state in the country to raise the juvenile age. A couple of years ago, if you were 16 or 17 years old and you were arrested, you were charged as an adult. There was no consideration of brain development or any of those kinds of things. And you had a criminal record that would stick with you. Public access databases could find it. So we were the last state in the country to raise the age to 18. So that introduced 16 and 17-year-olds into the juvenile justice system. So in order to obtain secure custody for kids, it has to meet statutory requirements that aren't the same as it had been previously. So they have the statutes that you have to meet in order to obtain secure custody. So it's a judicial decision based on the charge. So that's the kind of thing that you have to consider. We have a statute and we have a decision-making tool that we use to help guide us through it that was developed through the Annie Casey Foundation, through the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiatives. And so we exercise a great deal of caution if we're going to deprive children of their liberty and take them from their parents and incarcerate them. That's not something that we do lightly. So that's a judicial decision based on law, based on statute. So
thank you. Yes, thank you so much for clarifying that and for elaborating. And now we're at the point where we can entertain questions for a couple of minutes. If you have any burning questions that they would like to ask? Any comments? I know there's some conversation going on in the chat, and I have a hard time doing two things at once, but I think people are addressing the questions in chat. If not, feel free to post those. But again, I think that this has been a very robust conversation. The meat of Trust Talks actually happens in the small group discussions, as you all saw. And so that is where the groups are smaller, people feel more free to speak and have their voices heard. And so it's a critical part of the whole Trust Talks process. So again, I appreciate you all. We all appreciate you for your candor and for helping to start to build that trust to talk about things like gun violence in the community, which is a highly sensitive issue. So any closing thoughts? Or Chief, I usually give that to you to close us out. So if you have any words of wisdom, we would appreciate hearing those before we adjourn.
I think the words of wisdom, Wanda, has been spoken by all of our participants tonight. I think we all see things from different sets of lenses, and to be able to come into a space like this and share those ideas, and more importantly, some of those experiences. There are many of us on this call have lived experiences that some of us will never have. And being able to be open and honest and share that information, I think helps us all move in the direction that we're trying to go. I hope you all found this to be certainly worth your time, and that we can go from having these discussions to moving into actions that we heard Nikita McDaniel and Kelly Easton and some of the others speaking to. I named them because I have seen them out and been involved in some of the meetings, community meetings that they've been involved in. Also, I'll say that whatever, someone mentioned about how this is a lot of work. It is hard work, and you'll find yourself being extremely tired. If we just find the little piece, and I've shared this with many people in the past, by the yard is hard, but inch by inch, anything is a cinch. So if we as individuals committed to making this community better, find our inch in the problems that we've described today and work towards improving that inch, together, we can make a huge difference. But I think we need to do more of this type of discussion and realize that we don't have to work in silos, that we can join our resources and be a force multiplier in our community. There are people out there that are struggling, that are hurting every day. And we, this group, this Trust Talks tonight, have the power to change lives in a positive direction if we continue to remain committed to working together and not be tired by the work and the time that it's going to take to get it done, because it's going to take some time. But find that inch that you can own and make the difference. And I think we'll see a change. Again, someone mentioned that it didn't happen overnight. We didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to be able to change it overnight. But we just got to be committed to making the change. With that, again, I thank you. And I say to my girl, Chief Miles, I love you.
And Chief Thompson, we think the world of you too. We're blessed to have a police chief of your caliber here in the city of Winston-Salem. And we're also blessed to have a police department like the one we have, who's willing to sit down and talk to citizens and to talk to the general public about really tough issues like the one we tackled tonight. And with the Human Relations DEI department, of course, a part of what we do is to bring our community together. That is what we are charged with, being inclusive of our community. We're charged with making sure people's voices are heard, especially those who are marginalized and who rarely have the opportunity to have their voices heard. And so we to play a part in facilitating this type of discussion with our community and with our police officers So I just want to thank each and every one of you. As we said, the police department will take these comments and your top 3 takeaways back to the police department and incorporate those recommendations and those comments into their training. And so it was not for naught. In other words, you've been heard, and it will be documented in their training. So thank you to Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Martin. Thank you to Assistant City Manager Patrice Toney. Thank you, of course, to Mayor Alan Joins, to Andy Hagler, to, of course, Chief Thompson and everyone else who participated tonight, Stan Clarkson, everyone who participated, Mr. Richardson. Thank you for your time. Thank you to Councilmember Scipio and Councilmember Burke for also participating, and Sheriff Kimbrough. Thank you so much. And yes, Assistant Chief Miles, we do love you. We will miss you. Thank you for helping to build Trust Talks into what it is. Thank you, and retirement, and happy birthday. Have a good evening, everybody.
You too, and thank you, Wanda.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Wanda.
Good night, Wanda.